Hey everybody, welcome to another DoneJS contributors meeting. My name is Justin Meyer, and with us we got almost the full cast and crew of DoneJS contributors. You want to say hello, Julian?
Hello, Julian from Germany.
Hey, it's Kevin from outside of Chicago.
And Sheriff, you want to say hello?
Hello, Sheriff from Algeria.
Hey, Mills here from Calgary, Alberta, Canada.
Matthew from Kentucky.
Thanks everybody for joining us and for everybody joining us online. Appreciate those views, and I am watching the YouTube comments. I'll prove it. I'll say something right now. For anybody who's watching the live stream, I am keeping my eye on that. So please feel free to interject there. So let's go around and give statuses. I'll go first. This week I gave a new DoneJS Chicago training. It was validating a credit card application. I'm going to do a real quick screen share of the guide, just to show how pretty and cool it is. So this walks through building a validated credit card with Stripe. So this is, if you want to become a .com billionaire, the first step is figuring out how to take people's credit card information. So this will show you how to do that with Stripe's APIs, which are pretty convenient, easy to use. I'm not a paid sponsor by them. If someone wants to sponsor me from them, I'll take the money. But it's a good way of setting up taking credit card payments. So that's it for me. Next week, I will probably be finishing slots and releasing DoneJS 3.9, taking all the credit from Kevin. Julian, how's it going?
Yeah, it's good in Germany. So I have nothing to talk about this week. I still worked on that stash sub-template. We worked about a half a year ago, I think. So maybe I can have time to work on it. So let's see.
Awesome. If you ever need help, just send me a calendar invite, and I can make time for it.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Kevin.
Yeah, so yesterday, the end of a long journey, we finally published all of the CanJS libraries that are using CanReflect under the hood. So we get new minor versions of everything was published late last night. And that's it. That's all I worked on the entire week, was getting that finished. So next week, like someone else will be working on CanJS 3.9.0, which will have CanReflect included, and also have some other stuff. React View models should be in there. We should finally be able to update to Steel 1.0 in CanJS, which would be awesome. Slots inside of CanStash should be in there also. I personally will be working on client work, but hopefully that should land. So that's it for me.
Awesome. Sounds good. Sheriff.
Okay, for me, I was working on the issue on CanStash, where when plain object scope doesn't work with subtemplates. It seems it's an easy task, but it breaks two tests, or one test, one for the DOM and the other for the VDOM. I don't know if I can share my screen. Okay. Do you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, so this is the test I added. It's an easy test, but it breaks the test where we should test the subtemplate when it is empty. I don't remember the line. What caused the break is when we wrap the renderer with the make render convert scopes functions. That caused the break. But what is weird, there is already a similar test that works. So I don't understand why it breaks. I don't remember the line. Okay, so for this test, it doesn't break visibly. It's the same as this test, but when it tests this line, it breaks. The test gets broken.
Oh, I think that's just because that other code that you added, it should be checking if there is a renderer, and if not, it should not be calling convert to scopes. I think it's producing a renderer no matter what, where you only want it to actually like produce a renderer if there's a renderer.
Okay, I tried to make this, but it breaks other tests. So maybe I should dig deeper why this happened. Also, I was looking to I was looking for a way to how we can highlight or to present the highlights of the receipts, what we talked about just in last time. So maybe we should improve the CamJS receipts documentation, and in the introduction we can put some explanation for the strength of this widget and why we implement it this way.
Yeah, that would be great. Pretty awesome.
I was thinking about this, and also I was thinking how we can add more receipts. Maybe this is a subject that we can talk about later in yes, after the stages.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds great. Yeah, and again, if you want help with that issue, like just send me an invite. Pretty much anytime, I'll make myself available.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. That's it for me.
Awesome, thank you. Nils?
I've been working on some improvements to the Can Connect documentation, just overall increasing clarity and kind of filling out some gaps that we had in our current docs. And also talking to a few of our users and other Batovians about a new interface for Can Connect, something that would be based around ES classes and ES6 classes and ES6 decorators. And that'll be something we talk more about in the topics.
Sounds good. Matthew?
I'm working on adding HTTP2, I can never say this, H2 support to DoneJS. I've been working on it for a little while. I've run into a bug in Node Speedy, which is the most popular HTTP2 library for Node.js. I guess we are pushing the limits on HTTP2 support in Node.js. I don't think a lot of people are using it yet. So when you combine using push, which we're doing, and then using having like a lot of requests active, which is what happens when you load a DoneJS app in development mode, you have a lot of requests come in. When those two things happen, there's like a prioritization there's a prioritization H2, and the code gets wrong there, I guess you would say. So I'm working on fixing that bug so that I can continue to work on the rest of the stuff that I'm working on.
Awesome, exciting stuff. Cool, anything else anybody wants to talk about before we move on to topics? All right, let's move on to topics. I got first dibs with topics, so I will bring mine up. I've got two. I'm gonna talk about a new binding syntax proposal and just streaming view models idea that's been bouncing around my head that I finally got time to write up. So the alternate binding syntax. So this I wrote like last night in a fit of rage after getting back from the DoneJS Chicago meetup where I gave that ATM or the credit card example. Because just there was one guy who's been coming to these, like he's come to like at least 4 of them, maybe every one of them, with maybe one exception. And he's just like, yeah, I come all the time and I still can't remember the binding syntaxes. And I'm like, yep, I've heard that like one too many times, and now we need to do something about it. So I made a proposal to change our binding syntaxes to something like this. I got above the existing, and yes, this would mean we're changing our binding syntaxes like several times, but you know, it's worth getting right because it's such a common part of CanJS. Of course, we can be backwards compatible, like we still are with our oldest binding syntaxes. But the idea is that you would just, to listen to an event, you do on click like this, to export or to import a value from the scope, you do value from scope. To export it to the scope, you would do value to scope. And then to set up a two-way binding, it would be bind like this.
And so I have a question. So value there, that would be the actual value attribute property from the input element?
Yes.
Would you be able to do the same thing with view model properties if that were a component?
Yeah, so that's what I talk about. Two ways of addressing, we have two potential ways of addressing what to do if this is on a view model. Now, one thing I should state, I want to build this with can element in mind, which would be kind of the next component, where there really are there's no difference between a property on the element and a property on the view model. That's combined. So this syntax would work on elements and work as well on can element. We wouldn't need the special like dollar versus no dollar that we have right now. It would just be this for everything.
You don't with can element anyways, but
huh?
You don't with can element anyways.
Yeah, you don't with can. Yeah, that's true. You can just use these, but you have to use dollar for can element.
No, you don't.
You don't? It detects.
Yeah, it's tricky. It makes itself be its own view model, so either will work.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a little okay. Sure. Yeah, it's gross, right? Like there's some grossness either in maybe the syntax isn't gross, then we're doing gross things underneath. I want to eliminate.
The only question, I mean, I think you should do it. Let
me finish. Let me finish what Kevin was asking about real quick. So how to address the view model problem? I kind of outlined two different ways. One way is if you want to listen to the view model, we can allow people to be very explicit about that. You can have a view model colon. Right. We would basically start. This syntax would kind of be the reverse of what we have right now. So where I actually should remove the dollar for all of these, but you know, we make our view model bindings a little bit longer, really because we know that in the future this is going to land and things will work this way. Now, the other option is just like if there is a view model. So, like I said here, 99% of the time, I think if you're doing a binding on a component, you almost always want to go to the view model. I can't ever remember a case where I've really set bindings on attributes on a view model. There's almost no reason to ever do that other than you want to be like a masochist and like, well, I want to set this attribute and then I'm going to set up an attribute binding to my component. So it's like it's almost a real element. No, then you're just crazy. Get out of here. So one other option is just like we just detect if there is a view model. For right now, we just say if there is a view model, eventually things will not have view models. They will be, you know, the elements themselves. If there is a view model, well, then we default to that. So there is no way with this syntax, there would be no way of setting up bindings on something that has a view model on its attributes, but my guess is that it doesn't matter. So there's kind of, we could of course do both, but these are kind of two different options. I don't know if people have a feeling one way or the other.
Personally, I'm fine with going directly to the view model rather than using the VM indicator. And if you, for some reason, you want to bind to the element rather than the view model, I think you could special case that instead.
Yeah, I agree. I like number two.
I don't. I think I like option number one actually, because you bind. You like most things are not canned components, right? Like most things in a template are not canned components; they're elements. So why are they the special case and not canned components?
They wouldn't. I don't think that's what.
No,
Nils
there is
was
no.
proposing.
The case is it's just detecting if there is a view model, and then it finds on the view model automatically.
Oh, I see. It looks.
It works kind of like what you're talking about. It kind of happens already with can element.
Okay. All right.
I think what Nils was saying is if you had a component and you wanted to bind to an attribute on that component, then you'd have to special case that.
Right.
Yeah, which is kind of a third option, which we could do. The reason why I kind of like number 2 is mostly because like we just don't have to then document this either.
Yeah.
There's just one syntax you need to know. It's geared up for the future with can element, and be done with it.
And it does what you want it to do most of the time. Or like
99% of the time. Yeah. I've only seen someone do this once, and it was just because they were like trying to prove something, not because they had to do it that way. Okay, one other thing I think cool is that there's this long-standing like issue number 6 in can-stash bindings. That is like comes from other super old CanJS, which is just the ability to listen to enter instead of change, and that's when a value gets updated. What the syntax allows is, I think, a pretty elegant way of doing that, which is to combine on and value 2 or 2 in the same kind of syntax. So you would say like on enter value to scope value. So this is going to set up what you're binding to. This is the property, and you're sending it to the right. I think that's a pretty. I like that.
So can you explain what that does again? So it would only bind it on enter instead of on change?
Instead of the default change event.
Okay.
Normally, if you just do on enter, like, or if you have, we have a mapping. I think Matthew and I have talked about this for a long time. That we wanted to get. I think Matthew especially wants to get rid of this mapping that we contain. That's like on value, we just know to listen to change. We have basically a mapping of given some property name here. How do you listen to it and it changes? How do you read it? This would kind of eliminate that. You specify both of your event and your what you want to read. It's kind of like that version of computes that you can kind of pass it like the property and the event to listen to. It's kind of like building one of those. And then when that changes, it's what it's updating. So anyways, I like that it solves this. The final consideration is, and this not everybody might be even familiar here, we now support in our event bindings the ability to do contextual bindings. What this sets up is on person, listen to their born event, and then run this animate. So if person is like a value in the scope, we want to listen to born, but then run something on this element. This is really nice for validations, right? Because the div doesn't always have an event, but when a person is born, for instance, you might want to like animate like, hey, a little spinning, I don't know, thing. I don't know what you want to do, but we support this because that's kind of common. Options for how to deal with this. This is probably my favorite. On the born event by person, run animate. You just would add like a by. Other people suggested a for, and then some other people suggested reversing it or supporting both directions, which I think is doable.
Do you need that, like the by? Could it just be on born :person?
Yeah.
Or person :born? Sure,
it could be. On person :born. Yeah, that would work too. I guess I would say for now, I want to punt on this. This is one of those like things that like we can add this later. I don't want this one little thing to like get sidetracked. But let me just put that in while remembering on. I would probably do it person :born.
Is there any problem with using colon like with name? HTML doesn't have namespaces, right? That's XHTML, which no one uses, so we don't have to worry about that. That's a question.
Yeah, I tried it. I experimented with it today, and it just happily accepted setting attributes like this and did not complain. So
And the name
Yeah.
would typically be on the tag name rather than an attribute name.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think you can have namespace attributes too, actually, but I don't think it's I don't think it matters for like what we're trying to accomplish here. So I guess what I'm proposing, and let me know if we need to put this to a vote. I'm proposing I would like to do this with an upcoming sprint that either I'll do it or I'll task somebody on it. I think I estimate like if it were like me doing it, it would probably take like a week and a half. Someone else, maybe a little bit over 2 weeks. But I would like to start pursuing this short term of this.
Is this syntax equal to our current syntax that we have?
It is. It performs does the exact same things. Yes. So that's why I like
all the stuff like the @ symbol, the % symbol, and
yes, those all would be supported in the same way.
okay.
So this is just replacing like the bracket braces and parentheses.
Yeah, you could pretty much think of it as like whatever you would have in here would just go right here.
Okay.
Now there is like we are going to have to probably make sure like if someone did @value that like we escape and make it so that the attribute can actually be set that looks like that. I will want to make this support camel casing fully, so you can just write out like a camel case here, and then we'll kind of serialize that back to an HTML form, so that when it's read back, we get back the camel case, right? That's a big thing I want to support, which is like this kind of stuff with this. So this is invalid HTML, but we can deal with that when we're parsing this. We will insert essentially the hyphen here, and then when we read it, we will re-put it. Actually, I probably won't even do that. But what I'll probably actually do is convert this to something else, which is like some capital C property or something. It means like some kind of escaping syntax to say this next character. That way, dashes would still work if people want dashes. If people want slashes, then if they actually wanted a slash, then they have to do double slashes, but the slashing would be kind of the escaping that I would try to make work somehow. So that's or maybe it becomes colons because we already have single colons. I don't know. It becomes something. I think Niels has already worked a little bit on something like this. So any resistance to this? I mean, I don't know when we'd schedule it for the topic. Let me put it this way. Any resistance to the idea when it gets scheduled is a different kind of thing. Cool. I'll take that as unanimous consent, and we will move on. Okay, so the next thing I just want to bring up is just an idea that I've been playing with. This is not something that I'm looking to enact very quickly, but I've been doing a lot of streams. At some point, some widgets that have been built end up like being a lot of streams instead of a lot of just normal properties. And because of that, at some point, it's like at some point when you've got almost all streams, it's like you just want to stick around in streamland and not like really go to properties. So I've just been trying to play with ideas on how to make that a little bit easier to avoid any sort of imperative code. Here's a very example of a count view model. I think I put the equivalent. Because the problem is with like this kind of stream code, the equivalent always looks much worse with imperative code, right? I don't know if I actually put it in. Oh, no, I didn't really put it in, but let me write it up real quick. So what I'm mimicking is can define map. I'm going to add. It's just going to add a count, and then count is just a number that defaults to 0. Okay, so this is always like, so like, what are you doing? Why would you do this? But there's good reasons for it in a really like a much larger code base, right? So this is just a very simple counter view model that has a value and then an add method that increments it. But the problem here in big apps is that the counts value isn't determined by count. It's actually determined by add, and you could start having like subtract methods and blah 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 blah, like a million other things. And you can't really see what controls count. So streams can help with this, right? I could create saying something like, well, essentially what's happening is you could think of it as every view model instance kind of has this single stream of source events. And then when you call methods or set properties, those will always emit an event into that like kind of global stream for the whole count instance. So none of the syntax is even final. I haven't even thought about it much. It's just been like a conceptual idea in my head where I could say, hey, the add method, what I want that to do is emit a add event, and whatever argument was passed to add. So actually, let me go back. The idea here is add would take a number to add, and that would do plus equal number. It would increment count by whatever number was passed to it. So what this would do, I basically am saying like, well, take whatever the argument was called. The first argument, we'll call that value. That's going to be a property called value. So basically you name all of your arguments, and then you get an event object like this. It gets emitted, right? And you can always get that. Any property then can get access to that event stream of all of the methods or properties that are being set, and then they can derive their value. So in this case, like I'm setting up basically a scan, looking for the add event. All of this could, of course, be shortened up and made a little bit easier for these things that are so like common patterns, to not have to use scan every time. But basically, it's going to like take, if the event was add, take whatever the last value was, and then add the event value to it. It's also going to handle setting. So if someone tried to set count, because like it's possible someone could set count. If there was a set of count, then the value of count is just going to be that value. So here, this is like completely, nothing imperative. You could use your types that are immutable, and everything would just work.
But you emit an event on the streamed map or what it is. So that means that every function is called with the stream emit, or with the emit event. So,
well, this is I'm defining a count property here. So let me just quickly show how you use it. It's a little bit in define maps because nothing's imperative. There really are no values until you start like listening to it. So I want to do this for define map already, which is to say, if you just call on, like if you do it to define map or you do it to one of these this count view model, it's essentially going to loop through all of the defined properties and set up a binding on all of them so that they all have a value. So this would do the same thing on like asynchronous getters in define map. Is they like you can't actually read them until they're bound to. This would essentially bind to everything, just as convenience, and there would be an auth that unbinds to everything. So then you could just read the count property, call add, read the count property, set the count property. And it's producing events in this kind of, this event stream here.
Yeah, but if you have thousands of functions in your streamed map, then all of these 1,000 functions will called if an event is emitted by this add property.
Well,
right?
the count function is only called once, but the inner function that is the scan function, that would be called every time. Every time there's an emit that's evented within like this stream thing.
Yeah, but if you have other functions in your stream map, so that always called too, right?
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you. Yes, that is a thing. But
Yeah.
How's the performance? So if you called 1,000 properties each time.
Yeah, presumably this would be.
But you only want to have your count property, so you call all, and then you scan it and you say, okay, I don't need it, so I go to next, and you loop through all your properties.
So I guess I would say like presumably the performance would be the same as like a big like Redux application, because a Redux application, there's not going to be as many function calls, but it's a lot of the same logic. I mean, it might be a little bit grouped more, but a big Redux app is like event.type equals like, you know, you still have add, and then you've got your add case, and then you list like, well, if, you know, else if event type equals something else, and you might have mappings. And we could, I thought about it as like we could support like mapping, so you could somehow define like, hey, I only care about these events. So there's some pre-processing on the event stream that's essentially only gonna like, you know, especially if you're doing this kind of scan is the most common thing. It's like you tell it your events, and then when a new event is emitted on the event stream, before all of these things get called, it's gonna like, given the event type, it's only gonna call the functions that are really responding to that event type. So you could get a little bit faster dispatching. You're not gonna have to walk through this giant if-else kind of thing. But I guess I would say like this structure of having to check the event type and then do something to derive the value, this already exists in like Redux worlds, and they are able to do it. We would just have a lot more function calls and something like this.
It's basically like an if condition should not be the should not break your app. Like that should be that computational heavy.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that we are. It's definitely, this is an if condition build, but like with like every single thing is going to be a function.
Well, it's essentially like we're moving like where observables like set up this like up front, I guess, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like kind of like pushing it to be lazy. We're like lazily checking if we care about something, whereas like observables know that you're caring about it when you first create them. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like the laziness is potentially, you know, is the problem.
Yeah. I guess I would say like it's likely that we could
optimize
the performance by making it so when you're defining count, you can specify the types of events that you're going to care about, so that we can essentially keep an internal mapping of like, hey, add, well, now you've got to do these things. Set, you've got to do these. These are the ones that you're going to care about, and so forth. So we could just have a global one that's just going to do that. But there is going to be some dynamic cases, undoubtedly, where it's going to just have to resort to this.
So it looks like you talked about it a little bit in the issue, but what is the benefit of just having one event stream instead of having a separate stream for each of your streamed events?
Are you talking about what's different from how we do it right now?
Well, why are you doing it that way? Instead of in your count function, you would have to merge, say, the add stream and whatever, the reset stream or whatever you have. What's the benefit of just having the single event stream? We're talking about
this, like, add just creates a stream itself.
Yeah, have a separate stream for each of the stream properties.
The real benefit is like it's a kind of an easy choke point where you see all of the events that come in, and you could then replay them back.
You could, though. I mean, you could do, instead of count, you could do this.add map.
This.add.
So, like, you could have a this.add stream.
All of them, yeah.
Yeah. And then you could, for like debugging, have a separate event stream that merges all of your other streamed events streams. Whatever. For debugging, but that would eliminate the problem that you're talking about, right? Where this count function wouldn't listen to all of the events. It would only listen to the events it's interested in. And it wouldn't be as magical as trying to keep track of what properties that the count is interested in.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. I can see that. No, there is like I wonder if it would be quite as like I wonder how I guess I would like to see how that's tested in something like this craziness. The make model here is
how it's tested. Is that what you said?
Yeah. How something like that is tested if you're not getting kind of the global. I guess because you'd have to provide it. I think the problem with that is you have to provide it every stream that it might care about, and then you don't actually know. Because like how do you'd have to kind of create a fake object that has a this.add stream on it, because this would be calling this.add stream, right? And some of the benefit of this is that there's like this single source stream, and we can just emit, as long as we can just call this count, and I kind of show this like how to test it. I can just simulate all the events that would happen on my instance that might get generated by calling these methods or whatever, but I can just create them, call count to get the derived count string, and then I can just see what that produces as it's getting a series of events. To do this a different way, I would have to like do count.this or something, like or maybe there's an object that has the different streams that I could mock up and pass it as like its context. There could be like a stream ball, if you know what I mean, which is like you would you could do that like this.
Yeah, I think the type should be a stream itself, rather than
something like this, which would be your add stream, and then you have your add. Could you, because you knew it was going to use add stream, and then you have to kind of keep the stream ball separate from the instance probably, so they don't get conflated by people. I don't know. It's interesting idea. I guess I'm not like all of this stuff. I haven't played with enough to like. You really gotta just start building stuff, I think, and see.
Yeah.
I can only see so far with this. And then yeah, I know Chris mentioned some concerns about like, you know, coupling a single piece of data to many behaviors is easy to get wrong. Like I wish he was here. If you're watching this, Chris, you should definitely come on and defend yourself at some point, because my critique of that is that that is exactly what happens, though. I think this is actually trying to make things right, because the inverse of this is like imperative-ish code. Like what I like to be able to do, at least what's really nice for me, is to be able to say like I can completely define the behavior of count in count. So yeah, it's got access to a lot of things, but like that's it. Count. Here's the value of count. Here's how it derives itself from what's going on, other methods and things like that. If you don't have that, then people can kind of change your state a bunch of different places if they're returning their state. Like you can, one person can have the count be this, be setting count, doing something with the old count and the new, creating a new count somewhere, and then someone else can do it somewhere else. I like having a single, like, this is count. This is always be count. So I'm hesitant about this. That was kind of my comment about, like, I just see there's, I kind of, my goal here, my higher order goal, I'm kind of jumping all around this conversation, so I want to end it soon. My higher order goal, though, is really to try to make something that's kind of easy to deal with streams, easier than like if you're just using the Kepler stream, can define stream plugin, but can behave very much like a define map. So if people wanted to, like, hey, we really like, if we made something actually better than define map, you could use it and still provide extremely compatible API underneath of it. I like that conception. And then I do like a lot of what Chris is talking about, and I want to see if there's like a bridge between all of these ideas. But I don't know, just see. So for me, any other thoughts about this before we move on? Let's move on. Okay, so topic, Nils. Want to talk about?
Hey, yeah, so I alluded to this earlier, saying that I'm talking to some people about a new Can Connect interface, and I'll share my screen and show this issue that we've got. So there's this issue that's been created on Can Connect, and it's kind of showing off a few different for this new API. We pursued this because we wanted something that was more clear to the users what was going on, as well as kind of trying to distance ourselves from like basically a function that you need to call. Like right now you call that connect function and you pass it some behaviors, and then it orders the behaviors and passes back a constructor basically, or it passes back a finished connection. Rather than that, we're trying to move to something that works more like a traditional constructor. This first example is really based off of our current usage. It doesn't return a constructor. You just create this base connection, which is an instance of the connection rather than a connection constructor. You just start tacking behaviors onto it, and then you initialize the connection. There's really an alternative to these two other approaches that we discussed, which is using ES6 classes and ES6 decorators to create a connection constructor. Which you can see here, it's very straightforward. You create a base connection, or create a connection, a constructor derived from the base connection, tack on whatever behaviors you want as decorators, and then provide whatever configuration at initialization time. It's really clean. It takes advantage of the new ES 2015 ES6 classes and syntax. And so far, everybody I've talked to has preferred this approach. But then as compatibility for people who don't want to do ES6 transpiling, we're hoping to do something like this constructor extend usage. So as opposed to the first example where you were getting an instance back from a connect function, we're instead going to expose the base connection, essentially the base behavior, and give that an extend function, which works similar to our current Can constructor-based things like Can components and Can control, and essentially derive a constructor from that with a particular name, tack on your behaviors, and then use that constructor in the same way that you would in this second example above. This actually would be quite easy to implement and support alongside this second approach, because it's really an equivalent operation. Like these decorators up here are taking the constructor below, and we'll be doing essentially what you see here, which is looking at that constructor, modifying its prototype chain, and then returning a new constructor, or returning the same constructor with the modified prototype chain. So really these two approaches will be very interchangeable. We'd be able to support them with very little effort. And this would be completely compatible with anybody using, I think, well, really any of the browsers that we support. Something else that Matthew proposed, which would be using the class syntax, but not using the decorator syntax. And for the same reason, we'd be able to support that quite easily. This would work in all the browsers we support, with the exception of IE 9 to 11. Because the class syntax is only supported on IE Edge or Edge. But yeah, for people who don't mind dropping support for IEs 9 through 11, this would be another easily supported syntax.
Are those both supported at the same time, though?
You mean the sort of the third approach here, and then Matthew's approach? Well,
Decorators and sorry, I'm eating chocolate covered almonds. decorator's approach and one of those like where you're, because the decorator's approach, that's like mixins. That's expecting kind of, it's expecting to be past the to do connection, right?
Right. So, but like this base connection is a constructor, and this to do connection is a constructor as well.
Yeah, but the way that Matthew has it, data URL is going to do an extends internally. Combine request is going to do an extends internally.
That's the same way as the ES5 version he showed.
Is it? Can you go back to the ES, or not the ES5, go back to the decorator version.
Yeah, but my approach and number 3 are the same. They're just
but not
different
this
things.
though.
Yeah, those two are different.
Because that data URL is going to be passed to do connection and expect to mutate it. Combine request is going to be passed the result of that and expect to mutate it. It can't like change to do connection, right? Unfortunately,
I'm not familiar with decorators enough.
You might need to check that, Nils, because like in some ways, I like what Matthews is doing more
than the decorator approach here,
but not syntactically. I like what the decorator approach looks like because it's like cool, but the Matthews that it's doing extensions inside of there, and it's kind of creating a unique constructor function at every step, and then there's like one final extension at the end, which really isn't going to add anything. That is that's kind of like how Can Connect works right now, where there's these discrete things that are inherited from each other on the proto chain. I like that we're not going to munge like the combine request data URL. That's all I have to like munge down. Like it's actually like overwrite. They have to like all overwrite each other, and they're not going to be able to create like discrete objects. That's a really nice debugging tool on Can Connect. I think is that you can like walk down the prototype, the proto right now of a connection, and you can see like which implements what methods, and we would lose that because with number 2.
Maybe there's some restriction that I'm not perceiving, but I don't see how we could essentially take this format and transform it into something like the third usage. Because these would be past the constructor, and I would expect that they would modify this constructor.
I know, that's what I'm saying. Like that's I like that syntactically. I don't like it from like an engineering perspective.
In other words, what's happening in number 3, it's not modifying the base connection to it's not modifying the thing that comes in, which is what
it's stateless. It's like taking it and creating a new object that points to it, but it's like this whole new thing.
You could have different. So there could be a lot of code reused here. We could just have different functions that do each one. You know, and support both.
No, I don't want to support. I mean, the part of it is what Nils is trying to do is like what should be documented everywhere. Like we're going to start showing. He's going to start changing that. He might have to make some changes to make it work, but it's like, which one of these is like the gold standard for all guides, Can Connect docs, everything? And I guess I'm going to put it out here just because the engineering side of this, whatever you want to call it, I lean towards Matthew's suggestion as much as I like decorators. I think that it just, to me, it's scarier. It like exposes threats like that. I don't know. There's dragons doing that. I'm more worried about.
One of the impetuses behind this Can Connect work that I'm doing is to kind of simplify things and kind of make it more attractive to users. I just feel like the second approach is far more attractive because then that we could support them side by side. That's where I lean, and everybody I've talked to has preferred the second approach.
So, but the decorator approach is not solving the problem of sorting, right? Or how?
No.
I followed the last meetups on YouTube. So there was a problem with the sorting of our behaviors. So how do you solve that with the second approach, or is that not solving that any?
Yeah, we punted on that for a little bit, Julian, and we're like, okay, well let's let's not work on that. Instead, I had Nils, like, he's more working on the docs to like, they made a really nice graph. And it was like, I was like, well, Nils, go back and he's working on his conceptual understanding, working on some kind of maybe smaller problems, but very as important to hopefully build up, you know, more experience and more time for us to be like, okay, well, now we really have a good idea on how to solve the ordering problem. So this really doesn't address that.
Right, and that's not to say that this could not address it in the future. Like, the combine requests in this example could look at the behaviors that have been attached before it. Like, it's getting that constructor function and could see that data URL has already been attached to it, and it would know where to order itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, potentially. Like, but that's not something that we're planning on the first implementation of this.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. It sucks. It's like I just like I don't know. I assume Matthew, you agree with me about the third one, and I just think like the engine, whatever it is, the maintainability aspect. It's hard for me to swallow that because it's like I don't think that. I mean,
if your objection is that you only want to support one for like,
well, you can't only support one.
No, you can support both. You can detect. Sure you can.
How? They're both pass constructor functions.
They're not both pass constructor functions.
Huh?
They're not both pass constructor functions.
Data URL would be pass to do connection.
Yeah, in the second example, this function would be past the to-do connection constructor.
And then down below would be past connection as well. So they'd both be past connection. One would be like smashing it and saying like, well, I'm going to change the heck out of you. And the other one's like, oh, I'm going to make myself inherit from you.
So what if you made, in the first example, you had to call, data URL is a function in that example that you're pointing to. It's a function. So what if you had to call that function with no arguments? So like you could detect within data URL. If there are arguments, then do it the constructor way. If there are no arguments, return a function that takes the prototype. Do you understand?
Well, I mean, does data URL? Yeah, the problem is it's just like the result of this doesn't. Yeah. Well, no, I don't really understand what you're saying, Matthew. But
okay.
But wouldn't it impact the elegance of the? You're saying if it takes no arguments.
Yeah.
So you're basically saying here it has to take parentheses around. You have to do combine request parentheses, data URL parentheses, right?
Yeah, that'd be a way. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then down below you don't use the parentheses. Yeah, you could do it that way.
You could, but I don't know if that's pretty. I mean, it's less pretty.
It would be really weird because then like every one of the behaviors, it's like, well, if I didn't get past a sub behavior, then what I'm gonna do is return a function that's gonna like munge up whatever new constructor I got past.
And actually, but I think if you don't do the prints, you don't get the constructor. Just to be clear, in the class decorator, you do not get the constructor. You get, I think you get the prototype. I think.
I mean, I guess we should.
I'm pretty sure that you do get the constructor.
And I have an example right here.
I mean, it'd be amazing if you get the prototype, but then you can return back the.
Like, look at this.
Like a different prototype.
Okay, this is adding superhero. So superhero is a function. Okay, no, it's using it like this. Okay. So this is the function that gets called by the decorator stuff. It receives a target.
Yeah, which is the constructor.
Which is the constructor. Okay, never mind.
And I don't think you can return from inside that inner function. That would be awesome if you could say like, well, whatever this returns is actually my superhero class. If you could do that, then sure, we've got everything we need.
I was under the understanding that you could.
Oh, well then, great. What are we arguing about? We don't have to make a choice. I guess I would say then, Nils, you might need to then go back, figure that out before you make the final choice. Yeah.
Okay.
Because then we can use decorators, but we're never having to munge. We can always return like a inheritance scheme instead of a munged constructor function. We can have that nice proto chain where like we can see the discrete parts, which I really like that. I don't know. It's
Yeah, I don't want to lose that. So.
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, that's really what was covered in here. And like I said, I've talked to a couple other Bitovians who aren't on the call right now, and I've talked to one of our users, and they all preferred number 2. So I was going to look at implementing that next week. I'll definitely make sure that we can get this proto chain the way that we want.
Yeah, because I would say I have serious reservations about it if we can't get the prototype chain to look like what we want. Because as much as they might like using decorators, it's building the wrong type of thing. I think. I don't know. Sometimes you're just like, yeah, I know that's what you want, but like you've got to swallow a little bit more difficulty here simply because you're going to get something that's better for you.
Certainly, yeah. So I was just going to update our docs, like Justin was saying earlier, to kind of have this as the first class usage and kind of show this off. At the same time, I'd also be adding a very visible explanation of how to use this in ES5 if you're not doing transpiling, and probably creating a new guide, some sort of intro guide to CanJS or CanJS Can Connect that will show this off and kind of ease our users in a little bit easier than they have been so far. And yeah, if anybody out there in YouTube land is listening and they have some ideas either for this interface or just other issues that they had run into when using Can Connect and they have an idea for how to make it easier, please drop some comments in this GitHub issue.
Yeah, make Can set easier.
That's next. Yeah, it's on the roadmap. So. Cool.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Any other topics people want to bring up?
For the documentation topic, if you have time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, as I said, maybe we can put highlights for the receipts, and I suggest also to put best practices and patterns for CanJS, DoneJS, and almost how to make a high-level architecture. I think most of questions and in Gator or elsewhere are about how to make architecture, and we focus now for the low-level components, but I don't know if we have a plan for how we can make, for example, a fully single page application. I know DoneJS make things much simpler, but I think people don't see this clearly. So we have to mention that in CanJS, and maybe we redirect users to DoneJS, and we can say that DoneJS can generate this for you and give this for you for free. I hope you understand me. I think we can improve the documentation in such way. Maybe I talk with the idea of our community here, because that's the.
I think we lost share. Let me try to continue on.
What?
Hey, we lost you for a second.
Sorry, the connection was cut. You said, Justin?
I just said we lost you for a second.
Oh.
But you're back. We can hear you now. Maybe. I think he's frozen.
I didn't hear you. I
lost him.
Okay, well let me
maybe my connection.
Let me. I know we kind of talked about this a little bit online. Let me try to fill in what I think you're trying to say, and just propose some ideas. So the big problem coming to our, at least CanJS.com, is that you really don't know how to do some of the bigger architectural problems. And I would say that there's probably 2 or 3 big architectural problems that I think we could do a better job of showing how to do. One is just like how to, a guide around just like how to make multiple pages work and set up like a nice hierarchy of pages. Right? I think that would be just a really useful thing. Just pick like 5 different types of, like a samsclub.com type of website. It was like product, search, login, checkout, like 6 different kind of pages. How does that look? And then just make a quick thing where you can link and go back all between. I think that would be a really good get. I think the next is sessions and how to do login and log out and that kind of thing. I think Bitballs does a good job of showing that. Bitcentive does even a better job of showing it. But again, these are DoneJS applications, not CanJS applications. And then the final thing I think architecturally would just be component-to-component communication, which I think could be done probably much more simply. I think that's the least important, my guess would be. But just like how to have like a page level widget talk to and pass information down to all of like the sub-page widgets and pass information back and forth. Sheriff, let me know maybe later, or if your internet's working, if that sounds about right.
I didn't hear on what you said, but I will review the Hangout later and forward it because I think my connection was down.
Yeah, create an issue with these ideas and like let's start discussing and try to prioritize like which guide would be the best one to do.
I think also for Can Connect, I like if we have more examples, more advanced examples that we can show and code snippets of examples. So that's how people dig into the code, how we or the CanJS developers do it, and maybe it's a better because they see how the API is working, but they don't know how to set it up. So I like to have more examples on the documentation, show more examples of different and difficult problems.
Yeah, I would say post those because it's like hard for us to come. At least for me, it's hard to come up with difficult ones because everything's so easy. But I mean, legitimately, it is like something that's hard for me is very likely not hard for somebody, or like vice versa. So the more people post, like this is what I do at the every end of DoneJS. I'm like, someone draw a picture of like what app they want to do, and there's this guy Rod who always just immediately starts. Like he did it last night, drawing up some app that he wants me to build, and I've been using like the weather widget and now this login and log out that I'm gonna work on, and maybe even one other. The playlist editor, I think, came all from him, and he's getting all this free advice because he like will draw up, build this little part of an app, and then I do it. So I really need people to like give those use cases. That helps me a lot, like figuring out how to make a guide.
And this is something I've mentioned in previous weeks. Like our documentation review is going to try to make our Can Connect documentation more feature-based. Like right now, we kind of just, like the top level of the documentation, just here's all our APIs. If you want to create behaviors, do it like this. And it's like, well, I don't even know why I'd want to create a behavior, right? So we're going to kind of move some of that into like a little bit lower level documentations and make the landing page for Can Connect more focused around like, here's a very basic usage. And then we have linked to other guides that show more advanced usages and kind of per feature, like this guide that specifically addresses a particular feature. And if you have any advanced usages in mind, like something that is kind of obvious, definitely put an open issue or drop a comment in some of the open issues right now for documentation, and I'll get around to that.
One thing I could see would be kind of a stretch. Like I like guides that like have a purpose and kind of like a cool second thing that you're learning, right? Like the YouTube API or the Stripe API or something like that. I don't have this for Can Connect, although it would be that someone needs to come up with it. But I would like to see it just shooting from the hip. The Can Connect guide that I would make would be like a real-time fall-through, like add real-time and fall-through caching to your app, but it starts with just data URL. You know what I mean? It just starts with like, all right, we're just gonna make a connection to a RESTful service layer. Okay, good. Right now, hey, we want to be able to like have instances and methods. Okay, we're gonna add constructor. Oh, we want it to be CanJS constructor type. Okay, now we're gonna add the can map plugin. Okay, now we want it so that if I load the same instance twice, I'm only getting one instance. Okay, now we're gonna add constructor store. Now I want it real time, so you got real time. Now I want it so it's gonna hit local storage, and it's like you slowly build up, and now I want like kind of some of the more interesting things you would want for can set, and it's just like a huge like you're just adding feature after feature after feature. It's a long ass guide, but if like someone went through it, they would be like, okay, I understand how every one of these behaviors really fits in.
The GitHub API might be a good opportunity for that, because I know that they have socket.io push for things like comments on issues. So we could build like a little GitHub activity widget that you could embed on your project.
Take what Jason did and expand it, maybe.
Yeah.
Those are the coolest. If you can like take something that's like kind of hot and combine it with CanJS, that makes the best guide in my opinion. Cool. Anything else from anybody? All right, y'all. Long meeting today, but it was awesome. I think we talked about some really cool stuff. Hope to see you next week.
See you.